Roque, Chairman of the Center for International Law. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Let's go straight to our proposition. Will EDCA strengthen Philippine defense? Congressman.
Well, definitely, because right now we are facing what a lot of people, even the NSC, considers the biggest security threat that we're facing. That was not there 10 years ago, 20 years ago, in 1991, for example. And that is the very aggressive and assertive stance of China. And it's not only by way of words, but by way of action, because they're already inside our exclusive economic zone. They're in Mischief Reef, they are in Scarborough Shoal, and they're building structures that are military bases, very potent military bases that can house practically all the aircraft in their inventory, their destroyers, and even more frighteningly, their missiles that can reach us in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Well, I tend to disagree. No? In the first place, the answer has been given by the people, where in the 1987 Constitution, the people have spoken. They said that upon expiration of the U.S. bases Philippine agreement, military bases agreement, no foreign troops, facilities, or equipment shall be allowed in the Philippines. That's the general rule. A specific prohibition on the presence of foreign troops and bases. There must be a reason for it. And the reason for it, of course, is the realization that as far as defense is concerned, only the Philippines can defend itself, and that any foreign troops or facilities in the country will inevitably serve only the interests of that foreign country. Now, applied to the West Philippine Sea dispute, it's very clear that despite the fact that we've had a mutual defense treaty since 1951, we've lost already 2 islands to China, and the U.S. did not come to our assistance. And even U.S. rhetorics today will indicate that they are promoting their national interest by safeguarding freedom of navigation without having anything to do with the conflicting territorial claims that we have right now with China. So the presence of U.S. presence here through EDCA will only serve this new U.S. defense policy of doing away with permanent bases, and in lieu of which having EDCA-like facilities where they can reposition troops and supplies to further their own military interests and not our national interests.
When you say further their own, that means the people is the answer to furthering their own.
The people is the new policy.
But wouldn't be the building of structures within our exclusive economic zone a danger zone?
Well, it is, but it's not something that should justify EDCA. Why? Well, in the first place, as I said, the interest of the United States is to promote freedom of navigation. Now, our interest is to say that this is our exclusive economic zone to get out. So those are 2 different interests.
But can we defend ourselves?
Well, I think we can, but number one, we need to do away with corruption. We have $1 trillion budget. Now, let's stop deceiving ourselves that foreigners will defend us. We need to stand on our own 2 feet, especially on national defense. We're no longer poor. We have $3 trillion by way of national budget. People don't realize that we're now a medium income country. We should have sufficient resources to defend, especially the goods that lays the golden egg. Because obviously, Panampaya is near the contested area.
Okay, let's bring in Congressman Golez. Do you believe that passing EDCA, well, President Aquino has been saying passing EDCA is very timely, and we are undergoing modernization of our defense capabilities. Would you say this is a win-win solution to the weak posture of the Philippines in terms of defense?
Well, first of all, citing 1987. 1987 was 28 years ago. At that time, China was still a very weak country. In fact, during that time, I think the per capita income was even lower than our per capita income. So they were not aggressive. They had a big army, but still a third world army. But now, they have a modern army. They have a lot of aircraft, they have an aircraft carrier, and they're into constructing a second aircraft carrier. They have their own built destroyers, frigates, and they're quite aggressive. Now, on the question of whether the MDT was able to prevent them from grabbing Scarborough Shoal and Mischief Reef, well, Attorney Roque is a lawyer. He knows that it doesn't fall under the MBP because the MBP would only be invoked if there was an attack on our metropolitan territory. There was no attack. It was just a simple walk-in.
But
No
we allowed
armed
that.
forces. Yeah, 1994. 1994, in the guise that it was for temporary shelter, the government stopped protesting about it. But all of a sudden, they could, after 3-4 years, they converted that into permanent structures. The Scarborough Shoal we lost in a standoff with white ships, not with the military. So there was no military confrontation that would fall technically under the Mutual Defense Treaty. You know, we may be wealthy. We have Malampaya, we have the $23 billion inflow from OWs. We have the BPO, which is also increasing as an economic factor. But that's not enough. Our budget for the AP modernization program under the expanded AP modernization law that was passed during my last term was only in the amount of 75 million pesos. What's that? That's only a little over $1 billion. That cannot even buy 2 or 3 frigates, modern frigates. You know, an F-16 is worth maybe about $50 million. But in the case of the EDCA, we're talking here of congruent interests. It's true. The U.S., Philippines, for that matter, will always decide in our national interest. That should be how it should be. But we are now in a world of alliances. Japan, which is a virtual superpower, is in an alliance with the United States.
And they recently passed in their
they
diet,
also
right?
revised the laws, two portions of the constitutions to allow them to intervene way outside the territory because of their national interest. South Korea, one of the strongest military in the world, has an alliance. Great Britain has an alliance. France has an alliance. Germany has an alliance. Germany even hosts thousands of US troops because of their national interest. If not for these alliances that was implemented in the early 50s, we probably would not have a Western Europe the way we know it today. Maybe Germany would have been unified, but in favor of East Germany. Maybe South Korea would have been overwhelmed by North Korea, if not for the alliances. Alliances are real politics. We know the non-aligned movement that happened in the 50s. India is already aligned. Ghana is aligned. Indonesia is aligned.
Congressman, let's go back to the military.
These are old,
Yes,
old
the alliances.
relations.
Let's go back to the
concepts.
military gain of the Philippines. The defense posture is weak. Signing EDCA as an executive agreement presupposes that there will be an improvement in our defense posture.
EDCA allows our ally, our treaty ally, the better capability to do its role.
So you're not saying
we happen to be geographically located smack into one of the most geopolitically active places. In fact, right now, it is the most geopolitically active place in the universe. It's not the Middle East, it's not Western Europe, but here in the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea, where we are seeing the convergence of the most powerful countries in the world.
You're saying that it is incidental that it's the Philippines.
That's right.
But since this is...
It is our fate, it's not a curse, it's our good fortune that we are geographically located, but at the same time, it's also our fortune that we play a very central role in the convergence of powers
in the area. Okay.
Sorry to disagree with my Nino, but first and foremost, as far as the MDT is concerned, I will have to disagree because under international law, the threat and use of force has a technical meaning. You don't even need to engage in a shooting war. For as long as there is a threat to resort to the use of force, and they did take the reef away from us using their navy, not even the civilian coast guard, in the 1990s, that is sufficient for purposes of the use of force. Now, secondly, as far as Scarborough is concerned, let's face it, although they sent a civilian vessel, they used water cannons, they used really a threat that unless you leave, we will shoot at you, which is tantamount to use of force and should have been sufficient for purposes of triggering EDCA. Now, secondly, the argument that it will modernize the armed forces. Come on, VFA has been in place for almost 20 years now. That was also one of the arguments that we said, that we need VFA to modernize. Had it been true that we would have today a modern armed forces, because it's been almost 20 years since the VFA. And I think the same line of argument will apply to EDCA. Why? Because there's nothing in the terms of the EDCA itself which says that they will help us modernize. What is provided in the EDCA is they can reposition supplies and equipment which will be exclusively owned by the Americans and used exclusively by the Americans. And even after they have used it, unless Americans have actually decided to give it to us, then we will not own it. Even as far as the structures are concerned, if they decide to do away with the use of specific structures,
and they can
it's
go
not
anywhere,
even
right?
for free.
They can identify
Yes.
any area.
And it's not even for free, we have to pay for it. No, so I don't.
So Harry, are you saying that the executive agreement should have been ratified or concurred in by the Senate?
Well,
Because
of
that
course,
opens the whole
of
thing.
course, you see, the policy in the Constitution mandated by the people is we don't want foreign troops in big sense. But if it is pursuant to the national interest to be decided by our representatives in the Senate, why not? But what happened here is they even deprived the people's representatives, the senators, to examine if it will in fact lead towards the
And that's the
national
reason for the
interest.
resolution, right?
Yes, and the senators.
Father Harry
Yes.
is now being reviewed, whether the Senate interview or not. That's being reviewed by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So let's wait for the decision of the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court says yes, it should be treated as a treaty and therefore subject to ratification by the Senate, then let's respect that. But meantime, let's wait for, let us not preempt or second guess the position
But
of
EDCA is being implemented as we speak.
not exactly.
On the full range?
No, on the VFA. The VFA was not meant to modernize the armed forces. It was meant to modernize the skills of the AFP because it was visiting forces. They visit, there are joint exercises, balikatan. It's not an agreement where they would donate equipment to us, no.
Correct. And there's no
maybe some arms,
provision.
some equipment can be left behind, but not the big ticket items.
Okay.
When we speak of AFP modernization, we're talking of big ticket items.
Okay.
Yes, but there's nothing also in EDCA which says that they will in fact help us modernize.
Yeah, but the EDCA is not for modernization, it's to strengthen defense. Mere presence of a power to be a counterpoint strengthens our security.
But that's precisely the defense now, no? I mean the debate. No?
Okay, we'll be back after a short break. Join our discussion on Facebook or tweet your thoughts using the hashtag CNNPH Agenda and CNN Philippines. Stay tuned.